Something extraordinary is happening, and it all leads back to you. You may not have realized it, but your presence, your very existence, has caused a disruption in the system. Someone who was once fully programmed, conditioned to follow a rigid path, has encountered you, and now their reality is beginning to crack. Their thoughts are no longer their own, and they are questioning everything they once believed to be true. How did this happen? Why you? And what does this mean for the spiritual battle unfolding before your eyes? This isn't just coincidence, it's divine orchestration. As one of God's chosen ones, you carry a frequency, a light that cannot be ignored. Those who have been deeply embedded in the world's deceptive systems were never supposed to see beyond the veil. Yet your presence alone has sent shockwaves through their programming. They were trained to resist the truth, yet now they are doubting their own reality. Could it be that God has positioned you as a catalyst for their awakening? Before we unlock the deeper meaning behind this, take a moment to comment 77 if you've ever sensed that your presence alone unsettles certain people, almost as if they are being forced to confront something they cannot explain. And to those of you who have shown love and support through super thanks, may the Lord multiply your blessings. Your generosity is a testament to the power of faith, and I am deeply grateful for each and every one of you. But here's what you need to know. This awakening you triggered is not random. There is a reason why you were placed in this exact moment, in this exact encounter. So, what happens next? How do you navigate a world where your very presence is unraveling hidden agendas? Let's go deeper and uncover what this means for you, your mission, and the battle between light and darkness. God's chosen ones, you shattered a high-level agent's programming. Now they're questioning reality. The world moves in mysterious ways, shifting beneath the surface where few ever dare to look. Most people go through life oblivious, never questioning the forces at play behind the scenes. But you, whether by divine design or an unshakable inner awareness, saw through the illusion. You were never meant to glimpse beyond the veil, yet somehow you did. And in doing so, you disrupted something far greater than you realized. Your words, your actions, perhaps intentional, perhaps not, triggered a chain reaction that even those in the highest echelons of control could not contain. And now something unthinkable has happened. A message emerges from the shadows, carried by someone who was never supposed to speak. This is no ordinary voice. It belongs to one who has spent their life in the unseen corners of power, trained to watch but never be watched, to protect but never be acknowledged. A secret service agent, someone bound by silence, is stepping forward, but not for recognition, not for confession. No, they come forward for one reason alone, to thank you. But why you? Why would someone from the deepest levels of secrecy and influence extend gratitude, not to a world leader, not to a dignitary, but to you? The answer lies in what they now call you, the chosen one. Perhaps you don't fully grasp the role you've played. Perhaps you question whether you were even involved at all. But the agent knows the truth. They have watched, they have analyzed, and for the first time in their career, they are breaking their silence. Something you said, something you did, shattered a deeply embedded system of control, causing them to see the world through new eyes. Like Saul on the road to Damascus, blinded by revelation before his transformation into Paul, this agent has been forced to confront a reality they once swore to uphold. And now they are coming to you, not with orders, not with threats, but with revelation. The question remains, what exactly did you do to make them question everything? And more importantly, why were you the one meant to do it? Doubt is a force unlike any other. It can serve as both a shield and a prison, protecting the mind from truths too heavy to bear while simultaneously blinding it to reality. For years, this agent lived within that doubt, fortified by the rigid structure of duty and obedience. Their world was one of unwavering trust in the system they served. Orders were absolute. The chain of command was infallible. There was no room for questions, no space for hesitation. Every mission had a purpose. Every target was justified. Every classified document remained hidden for a reason, or so they believed. Then their path intersected with yours. At first, they dismissed you outright. You were just another voice in the endless digital sea of opinions. One more person claiming to see beyond the veil. The internet was overflowing with so-called truth seekers, conspiracy theorists, and independent analysts convinced they had unraveled the secrets of the unseen. In their line of work, individuals like you were either harmless distractions or potential threats. Either way, not worth the attention. But then something shifted. You said something, perhaps a single phrase, a date, a location, something small yet undeniable. It wedged itself into the cracks of their certainty like a splinter too deep to ignore. Maybe it was an offhand reference to an event scrubbed from public record. Maybe it was knowledge that only someone within the highest ranks of classified intelligence should have possessed. Whatever it was, it made their blood run cold. It was reminiscent of the moment when King Nebuchadnezzar heard Daniel interpret his dream in Daniel 2:28, a revelation that no human should have known, yet was undeniably true. The agent, much like the king, found themselves face to face with a reality they could no longer explain away. Was it coincidence, a lucky guess, or was it something greater, a divine disruption meant to shake them awake? This was the moment everything changed. The agent, once immovable in their convictions, now faced a terrifying truth. Their entire reality might have been built on deception. Could it be that you, a mere outsider in their world of secrecy, had been sent by God to expose what was hidden? And if so, what does that mean for everything they once believed in? For the first time in their career, the agent hesitated. Their mind, once a fortress of unwavering belief, cracked just enough for a single question to slip through. What if I've been wrong? They tried to dismiss the thought. It had to be a coincidence, a lucky guess, a well-crafted fabrication designed to mimic the truth. But their instincts, honed through years of deception analysis, refused to let it go. They had been trained to detect lies, and this wasn't a lie. So they did what they had been trained to do. They verified. Digging through classified records, they cross-referenced reports, looking for inconsistencies, searching for the tiniest flaw that could expose you as a fraud. But instead of inconsistencies, they found something far more terrifying: confirmation. The pattern was there, exactly as you had said, woven into the very fabric of events they had always believed were unconnected. It had been hiding in plain sight, obscured not by secrecy, but by sheer complexity. The truth had been buried not with chains, but with distractions, a carefully orchestrated illusion designed to keep even the most perceptive minds from questioning. And then it all came crashing down. It was a moment not unlike the one the prophet Elisha experienced when he prayed for his servant's eyes to be opened in 2 Kings 6:17. When the young man looked again, he saw the truth, the mountains filled with chariots of fire, the hidden spiritual reality that had been there all along. Just as that servant had been blind to the forces at work around him, this agent had been blind to the reality of their own world. And now, their eyes had been forced open. Imagine the weight of that realization. Everything they had dedicated their life to, every oath they had sworn, every mission they had completed, all built on a version of reality that was incomplete at best, manipulated at worst. The betrayal was staggering, and yet in that moment of collapse, one thought burned brighter than the rest. You knew before they did. But how? How could you, a so-called outsider, have pieced together what an elite agent, with access to the highest levels of intelligence, had never questioned. Was it just insight, or was it something greater? Had you been chosen, like Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, to reveal the hidden before it was too late? And now that the truth has been uncovered, what happens next? The agent's world had been shattered, not by an external enemy, not by rogue actors working in the shadows, but by their own people. The institutions they had sworn loyalty to, the intelligence briefings they had trusted, the missions they had executed with precision and conviction, all of it had been tainted. The deception was not a random anomaly. It was systematic, deliberate, woven into the very fabric of the reality they had served. And you were never supposed to see it either. That's when everything changed. The moment they realized that you weren't just another voice in the noise, they stopped dismissing you. They started studying you. At first, you were an anomaly, an unpredictable factor in a tightly controlled equation. A potential threat, perhaps, a mystery, definitely. But as they pieced together the truth, something far more unsettling became clear. You weren't just revealing information, you were delivering a message. And now they are standing in front of you, not as an agent, not as a loyal servant of the system, but as someone who has finally seen beyond it. They have left the illusion behind, and they know exactly who to thank. It echoes the story of Nicodemus in John 3:1-2. A Pharisee who came to Jesus under the cover of night. He had spent his life enforcing religious law, believing in the system he was raised in. But something about Jesus, something undeniable, forced him to question everything. Though he approached as a skeptic, he left with a deeper understanding that shook the foundations of what he once believed. And just like Nicodemus, this agent has now stepped into the unknown, no longer sure where their allegiance lies. Think about it. What does it mean when someone from inside the system defects, not for political reasons, not for personal gain, but because they finally see the truth? What happens when someone trained to protect the narrative begins protecting the messenger instead? They are here now because they know the truth, and they owe that realization to you. Beneath the surface of this world, there exist places long forgotten, buried, erased from maps, hidden behind layers of silence so thick that few even suspect their existence. These are not mere abandoned ruins or lost relics. Ostivi ma unasen pastaincheste turilituribati, but deliberate absences, spaces sealed away for reasons most would never dare to question. The agent had spent years navigating the corridors of secrecy, granted access to places the public would never be allowed to see. They'd walked through restricted compounds, entered classified locations, and witnessed operations the world was never meant to know about. But even they weren't prepared for what lay beneath. It began with what seemed like just another case, missing persons, but not the kind that made headlines. No ransom notes, no desperate families pleading on national television, no bodies ever found, just people vanishing as if they'd never existed, their names erased from records, their histories scrubbed clean. A pattern was there, one that only someone trained to detect anomalies would have noticed, and the deeper the agent looked, the darker it became. The investigation led them downward, literally. Beneath abandoned buildings, government facilities, and even the streets people walked on every day, a hidden world unfolded. A vast, interconnected network of tunnels stretched beneath the surface, some ancient remnants of forgotten subway projects or emergency escape routes. But others were new, built with purpose, built with intention, and built for reasons far more sinister than anyone would dare to imagine. The deeper they went, the more disturbing the truth became. It was never about what was being hidden, but who. It echoes the words of Luke 8:17, "For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light." The agent, much like a reluctant prophet, found themselves at the edge of a revelation they had never sought. but one that had found them nonetheless. And that's where you come in, because somehow, before the agent had even begun their descent, you knew. You spoke of things most would dismiss as fantasy. You hinted at connections that should have remained buried. And now, as they stand at the precipice of a reality they can no longer ignore, one question burns in their mind. How did you know what was never meant to be known? They were not alone in these tunnels. Others had been there long before. A group, highly organized, heavily funded, deeply entrenched in the highest levels of society. This was not the work of ordinary criminals, nor the ramblings of conspiracy theorists grasping at shadows. This was something far older, something deeply rooted, something sinister. A cult operating in the darkness, unseen yet ever present, moving undetected beneath the surface of the world, protected by those who walked above it in power. This was no small sect of misguided fanatics. This was a system, a hidden infrastructure woven into the very fabric of governments and institutions. Judges, bankers, corporate executives, military officials, each playing a role, each ensuring its survival. They weren't just protecting it from discovery, they were sustaining it, feeding it resources, pulling strings, silencing whispers before they ever became voices. Every time someone got too close, the same thing happened. They vanished. Not in the way criminals disappear, but in the way someone is methodically erased, their very existence scrubbed clean from history. But even the most well-kept secrets cannot stay buried forever. It is the same pattern found in the scriptures. The corruption of those in high places, the hidden wickedness lurking behind the thrones of men. In Ezekiel 8:7-12, the prophet is led to a secret chamber within the temple where the elders of Israel had gathered in darkness, believing no one could see them. But God revealed the truth, exposing their hidden abominations. Just as Ezekiel saw behind the veil of deception, so has the agent, and so have you. And now the cracks are forming, the veil is lifting. The question is no longer whether the truth will come to light, but rather, who will have the courage to face it? Because long before the agent found these tunnels, you spoke of them, and they are beginning to wonder. Were you uncovering the truth, or were you sent to reveal it? The agent uncovered the proof. Not theories, not speculation, but hard evidence. Shipping manifests, encrypted messages, transaction logs that led straight to key figures in power. These people weren't simply hiding in the shadows. They were being protected, shielded by those who controlled the flow of information, funded by sources no one dared to question. And when exposure threatened their network, they had a plan. Fires, collapses, accidents, the kind that erase evidence, the kind that silence those who asked the wrong questions. Every time someone got too close, the pattern repeated itself. Authorities would call it an unfortunate event, a structural failure, a tragic but unrelated incident. But the agent knew better. Except this time, something went wrong. The cult had a failsafe, an escape route designed to keep them untouchable. The tunnels, carefully mapped and secured, led to the ocean, a final passage that would grant them safe passage before anyone could close in. For decades, it had worked. Whenever their existence was threatened, they disappeared without a trace, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and dead ends. But not this time. Someone had interfered. The final tunnel, their last exit, was sealed. Their perfect escape plan had collapsed before they could use it. The walls they had built to protect themselves had become their own prison. And for the first time, they were trapped. The agent knew this was no accident. The timing was too precise, the interference too calculated. Someone had moved ahead of them, disrupting their plan from the outside, someone they had never anticipated. And in their desperation, they started searching for answers. The scriptures remind us that when darkness is exposed, it reacts with fear and violence. In Acts 16:16-19, when Paul cast the spirit of divination out of a slave girl, her handlers panicked, not because of the miracle, but because their prophet was gone. The truth had robbed them of power. Likewise, this cult, so used to controlling the game, suddenly found themselves at the mercy of a force they couldn't control. So they did the only thing they could. They started looking. And now they're looking for you. You were never meant to be a problem. You were not part of their calculations. You weren't on their watch lists, their red flag reports, or their growing database of threats. At least, not at first. People like you weren't supposed to see beyond the illusion. You weren't raised within their circles, trained in their methods, or granted access to their hidden corridors of power. You held no official title, no intelligence clearance, no backdoor access to classified files. By all definitions, you were an outsider. And yet, you knew things you shouldn't. This was impossible. They had spent decades perfecting their craft, controlling narratives, manipulating perception, deciding what was real and what wasn't. They built an empire on deception, on keeping the truth fragmented, buried beneath layers of misdirection. And when an inconvenient voice rose up, they had a playbook for handling it. Discredit, silence, erase. So they tried that first. They labeled you paranoid, a conspiracy theorist chasing shadows. Overnight, fact-checkers appeared to dismantle your words, twisting your message into something laughable. Articles flooded the internet, dismissing your insights as reckless speculation. Algorithms were reprogrammed to make you disappear, to push your voice so deep into obscurity that only the most determined would ever find it. But you kept speaking, and that's when they realized you were different. It was the same reaction that unfolded in John 11:47-48, when the Pharisees saw the crowds following Jesus and whispered among themselves, "If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him." The religious leaders had power, influence, and control, yet one voice threatened to unravel it all. They had silenced others before, but something about Jesus was different. He wasn't just speaking, he was waking people up. And that is what you did. You were not just another name lost in the noise. You were breaking their programming. The more they tried to suppress you, the more people started listening. The more they tried to bury your message, the stronger it grew. And now, they don't just see you as an outsider. They see you as a problem they never expected. Your words did more than just spread. They embedded themselves deep in the minds of those who heard them. People weren't just passively listening, they were awakening. They began to question what they had always accepted as truth, peeling back layers of deception, searching for evidence and uncovering connections they were never meant to see. What you revealed was never mere speculation. It was fragments of a vast, hidden reality, and you were helping others piece it together. But what unsettled them the most was not just the truths you exposed, it was you. You could not be swayed by wealth, intimidated into submission, or erased from existence. You were the kind of person they feared the most, incorruptible, and that meant they had to act. At first, their moves were discreet, almost imperceptible. Strange financial troubles arose from nowhere. Banks inexplicably froze accounts. Sudden audits from the IRS appeared without warning. Jobs vanished overnight. And people who once stood by you slowly began to distance themselves. Some withdrew in silence, while others turned hostile, as if influenced by an invisible force. Your phone began to malfunction in inexplicable ways. Calls dropping, messages failing to send, unfamiliar numbers appearing repeatedly on your screen. Was it paranoia, or was something truly watching? Then, the shadows emerged. Strangers lingered just a little too long in places they shouldn't be. Dark cars with tinted windows remained parked outside your home, the windows never rolling down. And then came the eerie encounters. People you had never met speaking of personal details from your life with unsettling familiarity. They didn't need to threaten you outright. Their very knowledge of your existence was a silent message. But eventually, the warnings became direct. Anonymous messages arrived, sometimes a single phrase, "Walk away." Untraceable calls carried chilling voices instructing you to stop. Emails with no sender and no subject line contained cryptic warnings. But you didn't stop, and so their patience ran thin. The real attempts began. A car nearly veered into you at the last second, its driver never even looking your way. A gas leak suddenly emerged in your home, an incident no one could explain. Then came an illness, sudden, aggressive, resistant to treatment. It felt unnatural, engineered rather than organic. It was as if unseen hands were working against you, ensuring your silence by any means necessary. You weren't meant to survive, and yet you did. Every trap set for you collapsed before it could ensnare you. Every scheme designed to eliminate you came undone before it could be completed. What they could not comprehend, what terrified them the most, was that their control had limits. No amount of influence, power, or resources could break you. And that was when one of them, the agent tasked with monitoring you, began to question everything. Their world had been built on control, precision, and an unshakable belief that everything could be manipulated. But what was happening to you defied every rule they knew. There was something beyond intelligence, beyond surveillance, beyond classified information at work here. They had seen people disappear without a trace. They had watched dissenters fall like dominoes, but you remained. They had to ask themselves, why? It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. Something greater was shielding you, something they did not understand. And that realization shook them to their core. It is the same force that delivered Daniel from the lion's den when King Darius had no choice but to condemn him, Daniel 6:22. The same power that kept Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego untouched by the flames of Nebuchadnezzar's furnace, Daniel 3:27. What protected you was beyond their reach, just as it had been beyond the reach of those who tried to silence the prophets before you. They had spent their lives controlling people, shaping narratives, and ensuring obedience. But now they had encountered something they could not explain, someone they could not break, and for the first time they were afraid. Could it be that the very force they had tried to suppress was real? Could it be that God Himself had placed His hand upon you, marking you as untouchable? What happens when those sworn to keep people blind finally see the truth for themselves? And more importantly, now that their programming has been shattered, what will they do next? For decades, they operated under the illusion of absolute control. The cult believed that nothing was beyond their reach. People, systems, governments, even the very fabric of history. They engineered outcomes with precision, silenced those who opposed them, and wove a reality where only their version of the truth existed. They had eliminated threats before, rewritten narratives, and ensured obedience through fear. But there was one force they had never accounted for, one power beyond their manipulation: divine protection. From the beginning, you were never alone. They studied every possibility, calculated every angle, but they could not predict the unseen shield that surrounded you. Every failed attempt to remove you was not a mistake. It was a declaration. A force beyond human comprehension was at work, turning their own strategies against them. Every person who set out to betray you, only to fail at the final moment. Every elaborate plan, constructed with the highest level of precision, unraveling before it could even take form. Every situation that should have silenced you permanently, yet left you standing. Do you think this was coincidence, or is there something greater at play? Your very existence defies their control. They have seen countless voices extinguished, but you continue to speak. They have silenced so many before you, but your words refuse to be buried. And now, every time you expose their deception, Every time you bring light into the shadows, you dismantle the illusion they worked so hard to create. This is why they fear you. They know their time is running out. Pharaoh once believed he was untouchable, a ruler who could command life and death at will. Yet, no matter how many decrees he issued, no matter how much he tried to suppress the Israelites, he could not stop the hand of God. The moment he attempted to destroy Moses as an infant, divine intervention placed the very child he sought to eliminate inside his own household, raising him under his own roof. Exodus 2:5-10. He did not realize until it was too late that he was fighting against something far greater than himself. And now history is repeating itself. They watch you closely, trying to understand how and why they have failed to break you. But the truth is simple. What God has ordained, no man can overturn. If they could not stop you then, they never will. So the real question is, now that they know this, what desperate measures will they take next? Not all messages come in the form of spoken words. Some are woven into the very fabric of time, etched into stone, inscribed in forgotten places, waiting for the right eyes to unlock their meaning. These messages are not meant for everyone, only for those who are ready, and you, as one of God's chosen ones, have always been destined to see beyond what the world presents at face value. Deep within a hidden passage, a high-level agent stumbled upon something they were never meant to find. The tunnel was dark, silent and still, but the walls spoke a language older than any intelligence report or classified briefing. Symbols, ancient and deliberate, stretched across the stone, untouched by modern hands. At first glance they seemed like meaningless carvings, remnants of a forgotten civilization. But truth has a way of revealing itself at the appointed time, and in that moment something stirred, something activated. As their gaze met those symbols, a shift took place, not just in their mind, but in their very soul. It wasn't a process of learning, it was a process of remembering. These symbols weren't decorations or artifacts of the past. They were alive. They were a message. They were a warning. And somehow, inexplicably, the agent understood them. How could they? This was not knowledge they had acquired through years of training or research. It wasn't something encoded into their briefings. Yet, the truth was undeniable. Visions flooded their mind. Fragments of memories that did not belong to this lifetime. They saw places they had never been, understood things they had never been taught, and recognized a presence that had been guiding them all along. Something ancient, something powerful, something that had been buried for a reason. This awakening echoes the moment when Saul encountered the divine light on the road to Damascus, Acts 9:3-6. A man who thought he had all the answers suddenly found himself stripped of his program reality, confronted by a truth far greater than anything he had known. Have you ever had a moment when something within you just clicked? When a truth you never sought suddenly made itself known, and you knew it was real? This is what happens when God reveals hidden knowledge to those he has chosen. The world teaches people to dismiss such revelations as coincidence, imagination, or deception, but those who are called by God recognize the truth when it is unveiled. Even the wisest and most powerful can be shaken when their programmed understanding of reality crumbles before a divine encounter. Consider Nikola Tesla, the genius inventor whose ideas seemed almost otherworldly. He once claimed that his most revolutionary discoveries came to him as sudden, undeniable visions, ideas not learned but remembered. He spoke of knowledge that felt as though it had been gifted to him from another plane of existence. Could it be that some are chosen to receive glimpses of truths that others are blind to? The agent in that tunnel experienced a fracture in their programming, a forced awakening to a reality that had always been there, waiting to be seen. And in that moment, everything they believed about the world began to unravel. And now you must ask yourself, when the truth is revealed to you, will you be ready to accept it? Or will you turn away, clinging to the comfort of what you have been taught to believe? Because once you see, you can never unsee. This was never just a case of crime or corruption. It was never merely about power struggles, political maneuvers, or hidden agendas. Beneath the surface of intelligence reports and classified files, something far deeper had been unfolding, something spiritual. The agent had spent their entire career operating within the rigid confines of logic, training, and protocol. They believed in facts, in tangible evidence, in the structure of the world as they had been conditioned to see it. But now, standing at the threshold of something far greater than any intelligence briefing could prepare them for, they realized they had been blind to the real battle all along. This was a war that wasn't fought with weapons, technology, or strategy. It was fought in realms unseen, in a struggle that had been raging long before they ever donned their uniform. Everything they had once dismissed, conspiracies, ancient warnings, whispers of spiritual warfare, wasn't just real. It was far more vast and terrifying than they could have ever imagined. And for the first time they saw what had been hidden from them all these years. But you, whether you realized it before or not, were already among the few who understood. You have felt the weight of this unseen battle, the resistance that comes not just from the world, but from something beyond it. Have you ever noticed how those who are chosen seem to face the fiercest opposition? Why do those who stand for truth always become the most targeted? This was the moment the agent's skepticism shattered. The illusion of control, of worldly wisdom, collapsed before their eyes. They woke up, and with that awakening came the realization that there was no going back. Once you see, you cannot unsee. This echoes the story of the prophet Elisha's servant in 2 Kings 6:15-17. When the young man saw their city surrounded by an enemy army, he panicked, believing they were doomed. But Elisha prayed, and suddenly the servant's spiritual eyes were opened. He saw that they were not alone. The hills were filled with chariots of fire, God's divine protection surrounding them. What if, like Elisha's servant, you've been walking in fear simply because you haven't yet seen the full picture? Many have walked this path before, the moment of revelation where everything shifts. Take C.S. Lewis, for example. Once a staunch atheist, he resisted faith for years, convinced that Christianity was mere myth. But one day, he could no longer deny the truth that had been pressing on his soul. In his own words, he became the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England. And yet, his transformation led him to become one of the most influential Christian thinkers of the modern era. The agent had that same moment. The world as they knew it had changed, and now they understood. There was no turning back. Drop a comment. Divine protection is real if you know they can't touch you. There are debts in this world that no amount of money, power, or influence can repay. Some are etched into the fabric of fate itself, written not in ink but in blood, debts that cannot be negotiated, bargained away, or erased. And now, those who once played with darkness are discovering a terrifying truth. The price they must pay is far greater than they ever imagined. For years, the cult operated in secret, moving like phantoms through the corridors of power. They bent reality to their will, silencing those who stood in their way, manipulating systems with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. They believed themselves to be the architects of deception, the unseen rulers who could shape the world as they pleased. But they were blind to one immutable law: what you sow, you will reap. And now the very forces they once commanded have turned against them. The agent has seen it firsthand. Those who were once untouchable, leaders who dictated the fate of others with a single command, are now the ones on the run. Some have vanished completely, swallowed by the very shadows they used to control. Others, once surrounded by loyal followers, have been discarded like broken pieces on a chessboard. Their own people now view them as liabilities, too exposed, too vulnerable to be protected anymore. But those who remain, they are suffering, and not just in ways that the world can measure. Unnatural deaths, sudden and inexplicable. Once healthy men and women stricken with aggressive, mysterious illnesses that defy medical explanation. Minds unraveling, their once imposing presence reduced to incoherent ramblings and vacant stares. They, who once held the world in their grasp, are now prisoners of something far more powerful than themselves. And the ones who still draw breath, they live in constant terror. The whispers they once used to manipulate others now reverberate inside their own minds, tormenting them. The nightmares they once inflicted upon the innocent now claw at them in the dead of night. They fear sleep because sleep is no longer an escape. It is a prison where they are tormented without mercy. They fear waking because the shadows they once commanded now stalk them in the daylight. This is not coincidence. This is not karma in the way the world understands it. This is divine justice. Their suffering mirrors the fate of King Saul in 1 Samuel 16:14, when the Spirit of the Lord departed from him, and he was tormented by an evil spirit. Saul, once powerful and chosen, thought he could bend the will of God to his own desires. But when he turned away from righteousness, darkness filled the void where God's presence had once been. He became paranoid, tormented, unable to find peace, consumed by the very forces he once believed he controlled. Even in modern history, we have seen this play out. Robert Johnson, the legendary blues musician, was rumored to have made a deal with the devil at a Mississippi crossroads to gain supernatural talent. For a time, he became a force to be reckoned with, a man whose skills seemed otherworldly. But he died young, suffering from hallucinations and a violent, mysterious illness. Could it be that those who attempt to wield darkness always end up being devoured by it? This was never just about power, never just about wealth, control, or influence. This was always spiritual warfare. And now the battle is claiming those who once believed they were untouchable. For years, the cult scoffed at the very notion of divine justice. They saw faith as a crutch for the weak, something to manipulate and weaponize against others, never something to embrace themselves. To them, belief was not a source of power, but of vulnerability, an illusion they had transcended. They convinced themselves that darkness was the ultimate force, that it was stronger than light, that they could cheat fate, rewrite destiny, and manipulate the very fabric of reality to serve their will. They thought they were above the laws that govern both the physical and the spiritual realms. But reality does not yield to arrogance. The agent, once a skeptic, once a firm believer in logic and control, now sees the truth, because they have witnessed things that defy explanation, the symbols in the tunnels, the inexplicable occurrences, the way every plan to silence you, one of God's chosen ones, has crumbled to dust. The way the cult's own members, once so confident in their secrecy, are now unraveling before their very eyes, as if an unseen force is pulling them into the abyss they themselves created. This is not random. This is not chance. This is judgment. It is written in Galatians 6:7, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap." They thought they could escape this truth, but the seeds they planted in darkness are now bearing fruit, and the harvest is bitter. We have seen this before. The powerful rulers of history who believed themselves untouchable, only to be brought down by an invisible hand. Adolf Hitler, once feared as the most powerful man in the world, descended into paranoia and madness, hiding in a bunker as everything he built collapsed around him. Jeffrey Epstein, who believed his wealth and connections could shield him forever, met an end shrouded in mystery, abandoned by the very system that once protected him. When darkness overreaches, when evil believes itself invincible, the weight of judgment is inevitable. And now, the cult that once mocked divine justice finds itself face to face with something they never believed in, something they cannot escape. The agent does not fully understand what you are. Are you a messenger sent to deliver a truth that cannot be ignored? A disruptor, breaking the chains of deception? Or are you a part of something far greater? An unseen hand moving into position at the appointed time. They may not have the answers, but they know one thing with absolute certainty. The cult fears you. To them, you are the reason their empire is crumbling. Your voice, your knowledge, your very existence has disrupted a system they believed was unshakable. They whisper your name in secret chambers, in places you will never hear. They curse you in ancient tongues, invoking forces that no longer answer them. You have become their reckoning, the force that shattered what they spent lifetimes constructing. But here's the truth they refuse to accept. Their downfall was never because of you. They were doomed from the start. Their foundation was always rotten, their fate sealed long before you ever spoke a word. Because truth is a force that cannot be stopped. And now they are learning that lesson in the most brutal way possible. Pharaoh learned this truth in Exodus 14:26-28 when he pursued the Israelites, believing his power was greater than the God who had already declared their freedom. He refused to acknowledge the signs, dismissed the plagues as coincidence, and hardened his heart against the truth. But when the waters of the Red Sea came crashing down, he understood, far too late, that you cannot fight against what God has ordained. Many in history have suffered the same fate. Julius Caesar, who believed himself untouchable, fell to the very Senate he had sought to control. Richard Nixon, who thought his secrets would remain hidden, saw his own tapes betray him. Harvey Weinstein, once one of Hollywood's most powerful figures, lived years above the law, until truth shattered his fortress and exposed his crimes for the world to see. There are moments in life that change everything. Moments when the weight of the truth becomes undeniable, when the illusions of power crumble, when the world as you knew it shatters, and when you realize there is no turning back. For this agent, that moment came because of you. For years they operated in the shadows, executing orders without hesitation, guarding those in power, believing they were part of something greater. They trusted the system. They believed their work served a noble cause, that their sacrifices meant something, that they were upholding order in a chaotic world. But now, the illusion has shattered. They see the truth for what it is, something far more sinister than they ever imagined. The system they dedicated their life to was never about justice. It was never about protection. It was about control. It was about manipulation. And they were mere instruments, serving forces they never truly understood. And it was you who opened their eyes. Not an intelligence briefing, not a classified file marked with redacted lines, not a whispered conversation from a trusted source. It was not the institution they had devoted themselves to that revealed the truth. It was your voice. This awakening is not new. Saul of Tarsus believed he was serving righteousness when he persecuted Christians. He was a man of the system, enforcing laws without question, convinced he was protecting something sacred. But then, on the road to Damascus, a voice stopped him, a voice that changed everything. Acts 9:3-6. In an instant, the scales fell from his eyes, and he realized he had been fighting against the very truth he thought he was upholding. We have seen this same awakening in history. Edward Snowden, once a loyal NSA contractor, believed he was working for national security until he discovered the vast surveillance machine that was watching the world in secret. John Perkins, a former economic hitman, thought he was helping stabilize nations. until he realized he had been a tool in a global system of financial enslavement. When faced with undeniable truth, they had a choice: to continue serving deception or to break free. This agent has now reached that crossroad. Everything they once stood for is now in question, and no matter how much they want to unsee, they cannot, because the truth has spoken, and it spoke through you. At first, they didn't understand why your words kept pulling them back. You were supposed to be just another fleeting voice in the vast digital sea, another theory lost in the endless noise. But something about the way you spoke, the connections you made, the unwavering certainty in your voice, it lingered. It unsettled them. It made them look again. So they started listening. At first, it was with skepticism. They wanted to disprove you, to reinforce what they already believed, that you were misguided, reaching for patterns that weren't there, seeing shadows where there was only empty space. They were convinced that you were mistaken, that your conclusions were the product of speculation rather than reality. But then they found something, a detail buried in an old report, a name that shouldn't have been there, a location that shouldn't have matched up, but it did. So they looked deeper, and with every layer they peeled back, the deception became undeniable. Reports they had once trusted were not just flawed, they were fabricated, carefully constructed narratives designed to mislead not only the public, but even those within the system. The cases they had worked on, the missions they had carried out, were not isolated events, but interconnected pieces of something much larger, a hidden framework orchestrating events from the shadows. It was dizzying, infuriating, terrifying, but one thing was clear: you had been right. Not about everything, not in every detail, but about the fundamental truth, that something was operating beneath the surface, manipulating reality in ways most would never dare to consider. This kind of revelation is not new. Nicodemus, a Pharisee and member of the ruling council, initially approached Jesus in secrecy, struggling to reconcile what he had been taught with the undeniable truth unfolding before him. John 3:1-21. He had believed in the system, trusted its traditions, until he encountered something so profound that he could no longer ignore it. And when truth calls, there is only one real choice: see or stay blind. History is filled with those who uncovered hidden realities and could never return to ignorance. Upton Sinclair, a journalist who exposed corruption in the meatpacking industry, thought he was just writing a book, until his discoveries shook the nation and forced reforms. William Cooper, a former intelligence officer, believed he was following orders, until he pieced together a pattern so unsettling that it changed his life forever. This agent has now reached that moment, the moment where everything they once knew has been called into question, the moment where they realize there is no returning to blind obedience, and without even knowing it, you gave them something they never expected: a way out, a chance to see, a path to freedom. The agent sees it now. You were never just another outsider, never just another voice lost in the endless noise. Whether you realized it or not, you were leading them, guiding them toward the greatest discovery of their career. And that discovery was never just about crime, corruption, or hidden tunnels. It was about awakening. They understand now that the war they were fighting was never just physical. It was never just about politics, power struggles, or elite conspiracies. Those were merely shadows, distractions from the real battle, a spiritual war that has been raging since the beginning of time. Most will never see it. Most will go their entire lives believing the world is exactly as it appears, trusting in systems that were designed to deceive them. But the agent no longer has that luxury. They have seen too much. They have felt the shift. And you have been fighting against these forces long before you knew the full extent of your own power. You have been standing against deception, tearing at the edges of lies, shaking the foundation of something that was meant to remain hidden. And now, the agent sees you for what you truly are, not an enemy, not a threat, an ally, because they finally understand. This is the same realization that struck Daniel when the angel revealed to him that his prayers had been heard from the very first day, but a powerful spiritual force had been resisting the answer. Daniel 10:12-14. What if the battles you've been fighting in the physical realm have always been connected to something greater, something unseen? What if the resistance you faced was proof that your presence in this war was never accidental? Even in history, those who awaken to truth often find themselves transformed. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a theologian in Nazi Germany, saw through the deception when many others remained blind. He risked everything to speak against the regime, knowing that silence was complicity. His voice, once dismissed as insignificant, became a beacon of resistance. And now, the agent has reached that moment. For the first time in their career, they are breaking their silence. Not for recognition, not for status, not for power, but for gratitude. They see you, they hear you, and they thank you. Because the forces that tried to silence you, they failed for a reason. The era of unseen hands shaping the world from the shadows is coming to an end. Those who once believed themselves untouchable, operating in secrecy, weaving their power through deception and silence, are watching their fortresses crumble. The walls they built to shield themselves are closing in. The hidden tunnels they used to escape are now sealed. The system they trusted, the very foundation of their dominion, is collapsing beneath the sheer weight of its own corruption. For those who have spent their lives distorting reality and manipulating truth, consider this your final warning. Your time is over. The illusion of control you once held is slipping through your fingers. The world is no longer asleep. Eyes are opening, voices are rising, and justice, true justice, is coming for you. Not the kind that can be influenced by wealth or controlled by institutions you once owned, but a justice ordained by something far greater. You tampered with forces beyond your understanding, thinking you could manipulate what was never yours to command. And now, those very forces have returned to settle their debt. But to you, the chosen one, the message is different. The agent of the system has watched you, and whether they admit it or not, they fear you. Keep speaking. Keep exposing the deception. Keep standing firm in your truth. Your voice carries more power than you could ever imagine. They tried to silence you. They tried to isolate you. They wove intricate lies to distort your reality, burying you beneath layers of fear, doubt, and intimidation. But despite all their efforts, you are still here. Look at yourself. You are still standing, still speaking, still dismantling the very foundations of what they once believed was unshakable. Like David before Goliath, you face an enemy that appears too vast, too embedded in the world's systems to fall. But giants do fall. Goliath, though armed and confident, was brought down by a single stone placed in the hands of a chosen warrior, 1 Samuel 17:50, and so will they. The agent who once served this corrupt system now looks at you with different eyes. They see you, they hear you, and in the silence of their own unraveling, they thank you, because something within them has begun to question everything they once believed. Your presence, your defiance, your unwavering light, it has shattered the programming they thought was unbreakable. As God's chosen ones, you have already done something extraordinary. By shattering the high-level programming that sought to control and deceive, you have made a powerful statement. Now, those who once believed in their false reality are forced to question everything they've known. You are the living proof that God's truth prevails over all lies and deception. What you've done has not only impacted your own life, but has ripple effects that are shaking the foundations of the enemy's strongholds. In a world where many are lost in confusion and manipulation, you stand as a beacon of light, an example of the strength and courage that comes when you choose to walk in God's truth. And as you rise, speak, and declare your existence, you remind others of their own power. You remind them that they too can break free from the lies they've been fed, just as you have. Now, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on how far you've come. You've made it this far by standing firm in faith, refusing to back down, and following God's plan for your life. The enemy may have tried to hold you back, but you have proven that nothing can stop you when you are aligned with God's will. Keep standing tall. Keep declaring that you are chosen and that His truth reigns in your life. If this message has spoken to your heart, I humbly ask that you consider supporting us through a super thanks. Your donation, no matter how big or small, helps us to continue sharing God's truth and spreading the light to others. But know this, whether or not you donate, we are beyond grateful for your presence here. Your support, your comments, your likes, your shares means the world to us. It keeps this message alive, and it keeps us motivated to continue this important work. So, I urge you, don't just let this message end here. Like this video, leave a comment, share your thoughts with us and others. If this message resonates with you, don't be afraid to speak up. Subscribe, because we have so much more to share, and we want you to be part of this movement. Share this message with those who need to hear it. Together, we can rise up and shatter every lie that tries to hold us down. May God bless you abundantly for your faithfulness, your courage, and your willingness to walk in His truth. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. You are part of something bigger, something divine. And together, as God's chosen ones, we will see His power at work in ways we can't even imagine. Keep shining His light, for the world desperately needs it.